You probably think you'd know if you were struggling mentally. You'd feel sad. You'd cry. You'd stop functioning. But mental health doesn't always announce itself with a breakdown. More often, it whispers through behaviors and feelings you've learned to call normal. The irritability you blame on stress. The exhaustion you call just being tired. The numbness you think means you're strong. The perfectionism you wear as a badge of honor. These aren't personality quirks. They're red flags, hidden in plain sight, that almost everyone misses. Today, we're counting down 10 mental health warning signs that look ordinary, sound reasonable, and are routinely ignored, but are actually your brain quietly screaming for help. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Irritability and anger instead of sadness. You're snapping at your partner over dirty dishes. You're fuming in traffic. You're rolling your eyes at coworkers who just don't get it. You don't feel sad. You feel angry. So you tell yourself you're not depressed. You're just stressed, or other people are incompetent. Here's what research says. Up to 40% of adults with major depressive disorder experience irritability as a primary symptom, and it's even more common in younger populations. Depression doesn't always look like tears. It can look like a short fuse, low frustration tolerance, road rage, or constant annoyance. The neuroscience behind this is clear. Depression disrupts the brain's emotional regulation circuits, especially the prefrontal cortex's control over the amygdala. When that control weakens, emotional responses become more volatile, often manifesting as anger rather than sadness. People with hidden depression frequently report snapping at loved ones over minor issues, feeling constantly on edge. Outbursts of anger that feel out of proportion, lower frustration tolerance than usual. Why is this missed? Because culturally, we associate depression with sadness and withdrawal. Anger feels active, even powerful. It doesn't match the stereotype. So you blame external stressors, other people's incompetence, or just having a bad week. But if your irritability is persistent, disproportionate, and accompanied by other subtle changes, sleep, appetite, energy, it might not be stress. It might be depression wearing a mask. The red flag isn't the anger itself. It's that your brain can no longer regulate emotions the way it used to. Number 9. Emotional numbness, not feeling sad enough. You used to love hiking. Now you just don't care. You're not sad about it. You're not anything. You tell yourself you're just mature or not as excitable as before. But emotional numbness, feeling flat, empty, or disconnected, is one of the most overlooked signs of depression and trauma. Research shows that 76% of people with severe depression report emotional numbness, and many say it's more disturbing than sadness. Instead of feeling too much, you feel nothing. Activities that once brought joy now feel meaningless. You can't feel strong emotions even in situations that should provoke them. You feel disconnected from others, like you're watching life through glass. You fake emotions in social situations because you should feel something. The brain mechanism here involves the default mode network and reward circuits. Depression and trauma can downregulate dopamine and serotonin activity, blunting the brain's ability to register pleasure or emotional significance. Trauma survivors often describe this as feeling dead inside. Why is this missed? Because not feeling sad seems like the opposite of depression. You might even think, I can't be depressed, I don't feel sad. But numbness isn't strength. It's a sign your brain has shut down emotional processing to protect you from overwhelming pain. If you've stopped looking forward to things, not because you're busy, but because nothing seems worth the effort, that's not maturity. That's a red flag. Number 8. Physical pain and fatigue. The body expresses what the mind can't. You've been to the doctor 3 times for chronic back pain. They found nothing. You're exhausted despite sleeping 8 hours. Your doctor says you're fine, but you're not fine. Here's what medical research shows. 69% of people with depression report physical symptoms as their primary complaint, and up to 90% experience fatigue. Depression and trauma don't just live in your mind, they live in your body. Chronic joint pain, limb pain, back pain, gastrointestinal problems, nausea, appetite changes, headaches, chest pain, unexplained aches that worsen during stress, persistent fatigue that rest doesn't fix. The mechanism is neurobiological. Depression affects how your brain processes pain signals, lowering your pain threshold and amplifying minor discomforts. Trauma can also cause somatic symptoms, physical manifestations of psychological distress, because the brain's alarm system, the amygdala, stays stuck in overdrive, flooding your body with stress hormones that create real physical sensations. Why is this missed? Because we're taught to separate mind and body. If a doctor can't find a medical cause, you're told it's just stress or all in your head. But your body is not lying. It's translating emotional pain into physical signals because that's the only language it has left. If you have unexplained physical symptoms that doctors can't diagnose, especially if they fluctuate with your emotional state, that's not hypochondria. That's a mental health red flag your body is waving for you. Number 7. Hypervigilance and sensory overwhelm. Trauma's hidden alarm system. You jump when the door closes. Bright lights give you headaches. Crowded spaces make you dizzy. You can't stand certain textures or smells. You think you're just sensitive. But these could be signs of hypervigilance, a trauma response where your nervous system stays stuck in on mode, constantly scanning for danger. Trauma rewires your brain's threat detection system. The amygdala becomes hypersensitive, while the prefrontal cortex loses its ability to calm it down. Result, your brain treats neutral stimuli as threats. Signs include being easily startled by normal sounds, feeling overwhelmed by bright lights or strong smells, avoiding crowded places, constantly scanning rooms or people's faces for signs of danger, trouble making or maintaining eye contact, or conversely, staring too intently. Research shows that up to 40% of trauma survivors develop avoidance behaviors without consciously connecting them to past trauma. Why is this missed? Because these symptoms seem random or physical. You might think you just have sensory issues or anxiety. But if your nervous system is treating the world like a battlefield, that's not a personality trait. That's a brain that learned to survive by never letting its guard down. If you feel constantly unsafe in safe situations, your body is remembering something your mind has tried to forget. Number 6. Always on and perfectionism. Burnout disguised as virtue. You're the first one in, last one out. You never take breaks. You feel guilty when you're not productive. People call you dedicated. You call yourself a perfectionist. But you're exhausted, numb, irritable, and you can't remember why you cared in the first place. This is silent burnout, and it's especially common in people who are passionate about their work. Burnout doesn't always start with hating your job. It often starts with loving it too much and ignoring early warning signs. Always being on and feeling guilty during breaks. Emotional numbness or detachment from work you once loved. Perfectionism that adds relentless pressure. Overthinking about whether your work is good enough. No work-life boundaries. Answering emails at midnight. Research shows that burnout has 3 domains. Emotional exhaustion, feeling drained, weak, unrefreshed. Depersonalization, cynicism, detachment, loss of empathy. Reduced personal accomplishment, feeling ineffective, incompetent, like a failure. Why is this missed? Because in hustle culture, these behaviors are rewarded. Being always on looks like commitment. Perfectionism looks like excellence. Overwork looks like passion. But if you're emotionally detached, physically exhausted, and mentally checking out, that's not dedication. That's your brain running on fumes. If you can't relax without feeling guilty, if you've lost the joy in what you do, if you're constantly irritable or sick, those aren't signs you need to try harder. They're signs you need to stop before your brain forces you to. Number 5. Faking emotions and withdrawal. The mask of hidden depression. You're the life of the party. You post smiling photos. You tell everyone you're fine. But inside you feel nothing. Or you feel hollow. Or you feel like you're performing a role. This is hidden depression, and it's dangerously common. People with hidden depression often fake emotions in social situations because they should feel happy. Give vague answers when asked how they are. Engage only in shallow conversation to avoid judgment. Withdraw from friendships and family life because they have no energy left. One study found that people with depression are at increased risk for other health concerns, because depression predisposes and exacerbates other chronic medical conditions. Why do people hide it? Stigma. They don't want to be seen as weak. Shame. They believe they should be able to handle it. Protection. They don't want to burden others. Denial. They don't want to admit it to themselves. The problem is that faking emotions is exhausting. It takes tremendous cognitive energy to monitor your facial expressions, tone, and words, while your brain is screaming that something is wrong. If you notice someone has become distant, only makes small talk, or seems to be performing happiness, that's not them being low maintenance. That's them wearing a mask that's about to crack. And if you are that person, know this. Admitting you're not fine isn't failure. It's the first step toward getting your real self back. Number 4, cognitive slowdown. Not laziness, but brain fog. You can't concentrate. Reading a paragraph takes 3 tries. You stare at your work and nothing computes. You call yourself lazy. You call yourself stupid. But you're not. Your brain is in cognitive slowdown, a hallmark of depression, burnout, and trauma. Research shows that 85–94% of people with depression experience cognitive dysfunction, including trouble completing familiar tasks, difficulty following conversations, problems making minor decisions, forgetting appointments, inability to concentrate when reading or watching TV. This isn't laziness. It's psychomotor retardation, a measurable slowing of physical movements and cognitive processes caused by disrupted neurotransmitter activity and impaired prefrontal cortex function. In burnout, chronic stress floods your brain with cortisol, which damages the hippocampus, memory, and prefrontal cortex, focus. In trauma, the brain's threat system hijacks resources away from higher-order thinking, leaving you in a fog of hypervigilance and dissociation. Why is this missed? Because we live in a culture that worships productivity. If you can't focus, you must be lazy. If you're slow, you must be incompetent. But if your brain is physically struggling to process information because it's overwhelmed by stress hormones, emotional pain, or trauma responses, that's not a character flaw. That's a neurological red flag. If you've noticed a decline in your ability to think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions, and it's not improving with rest, that's not something to push through. That's something to investigate. Number 3, unexplained avoidance, trauma's invisible boundaries. You take a longer route to work to avoid a certain street. You skip social gatherings at specific venues. You feel uneasy around people who remind you of someone, but you can't explain why. These aren't random preferences. They're unexplained avoidance patterns. One of the most common hidden signs of trauma. After trauma, your brain forms protective pathways. The amygdala tags certain places, people, or situations as dangerous, even if your conscious mind doesn't remember why. Research shows that up to 40% of trauma survivors develop avoidance behaviors without consciously connecting them to past experiences. Common patterns include avoiding specific locations, smells, or sounds, steering clear of people who share certain traits with an abuser, feeling panic in crowds or bright lights, taking circuitous routes to bypass unsafe areas. Why is this missed? Because avoidance feels like a choice. You tell yourself you just don't like that restaurant, or you're not a crowd person. But if your brain is creating elaborate workarounds to keep you away from something, that's not preference. That's a threat detection system still running a program from the past. If you find yourself making excuses to avoid things that logically should be fine, ask yourself, what am I actually protecting myself from? The answer might be a memory your body hasn't forgotten, even if your mind has. Number 2, normalizing the abnormal. Why we miss our own red flags. You've read through these signs and thought, doesn't everyone feel like this? That's just life. That's just how I am. This is perhaps the most dangerous red flag of all. Normalizing the abnormal. Psychologists identify several reasons we miss our own mental health warnings. 1. Stigma and shame. You don't want to be the person with problems, so you minimize them. You tell yourself you're just stressed or overreacting. 2. Wishful thinking. You want your relationship, job, or life situation to work so badly that you edit reality. You downplay red flags and rationalize dysfunction. 3. Not trusting yourself. You sense something is wrong, but you proceed anyway. Even with concrete evidence, you tell yourself you're just being negative or focusing on the bad. 4. Unmet attachment needs. If you grew up with inconsistency, neglect, or emotional volatility, your nervous system is primed to accept the familiar, even when it's unsafe. You're not looking for red flags. You're looking for connection, even if it's toxic. 5. High-functioning bias. If you're still going to work, paying bills, and posting smiling photos, you must be fine, right? Wrong. High-functioning depression and burnout are real, and they're often the most dangerous because they delay help until crisis hits. Why is this missed? Because our brains are wired to avoid pain and seek connection. When you think you've found something rare, a spark, an intense emotional connection, someone who finally sees you, your nervous system goes all in. You stop asking hard questions. You start justifying the unjustifiable. You call dysfunction home. If you've ever said, but other people have it worse, or this is just how life is, you might be normalizing something that's actually destroying you. Number 1, the I'm fine trap, when high functioning becomes high risk. You're the one everyone counts on. You show up early, stay late, and never complain. Your Instagram is full of achievements, smiles, and motivational quotes. When people ask how you are, you say, I'm fine. And you mean it because you've convinced yourself it's true. But behind the scenes, you're running on fumes. You cry in the car before walking into work. You feel nothing when you should feel joy. You're so exhausted that even breathing feels like effort. This is high-functioning depression, and it's one of the most dangerous red flags because it's almost invisible. Why it's missed? Because you are functioning. You're paying bills, meeting deadlines, maintaining relationships. You don't look like the depression stereotype, so no one asks deeper questions. You don't ask them of yourself either. Research shows that people with high-functioning depression often overcompensate by being hyperproductive to prove they're okay, fake emotions because they should feel happy, withdraw emotionally while staying socially present, experience cognitive slowdown, but blame it on being busy, feel intense guilt for not feeling grateful for their good life. The brain mechanism is the same as major depression: disrupted neurotransmitter activity, impaired prefrontal cortex function, overactive amygdala, but the person has learned to mask it with performance. The breaking point. Here's the cruel irony. High-functioning depression often leads to a sudden, severe breakdown because you've ignored warning signs for so long. Your brain can only run on emergency mode for so long before it crashes. You might be fine, until one day you can't get out of bed. Or you have a panic attack in a meeting. Or you snap at someone you love and can't stop crying for hours. The "I'm fine" trap is dangerous because it convinces you that suffering is a prerequisite for success. That being miserable means you're doing something right. That asking for help is weakness. But mental health doesn't work that way. You can't outperform a broken brain. If you've read through this list and thought, "But I'm still managing everything," ask yourself, am I managing or am I surviving? Do I feel alive or do I feel numb? Am I choosing this life or am I performing it? If the answer is survival, numbness, and performance, you're not fine. You're just really good at hiding that you're not. Conclusion: seeing the red flags is the first step. Let's recap the 10 mental health red flags hidden in plain sight. Irritability and anger. Depression, wearing a mask of rage. Emotional numbness. Not feeling sad because you've stopped feeling anything. Physical pain and fatigue. Your body translating emotional pain into physical symptoms. Hypervigilance and sensory overwhelm. Trauma's invisible alarm system stuck on high, always-on perfectionism. Burnout disguised as virtue. Faking emotions and withdrawal. Hidden depression behind a performance of happiness. Cognitive slowdown. Brain fog that looks like laziness, but is neurological overload. Unexplained avoidance. Trauma creating invisible boundaries you don't understand. Normalizing the abnormal. Missing red flags because you think this is just life. The "I'm fine" trap. High-functioning depression that looks like success until it breaks. These signs are missed because they don't look like mental health crises. They look like personality traits, stress, or just how life is. But they're not. They're your brain's way of saying, something is wrong, and I need help. What to do next? If you recognized yourself in any of these, stop normalizing. Just because you can function doesn't mean you're okay. Functioning is not the same as thriving. Talk to someone, a therapist, a doctor, a trusted friend. Saying, "I think I might be struggling," is not weakness. It's the first act of taking your life back. Check your environment. Are you in a job, relationship, or situation that constantly triggers these red flags? Sometimes the problem isn't you, it's what you're trying to survive. Treat your brain like a body part. You wouldn't ignore a broken leg. Don't ignore a brain that's showing signs of overload. Remember, you're not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it learned to do to protect you. The goal isn't to blame yourself, it's to teach your brain safer, healthier ways to cope. Mental health red flags don't always look like crises. Sometimes they look like the person who has it all together. If this video helped you see something you've been ignoring, hit like, subscribe for more mental health deep dives, and tell me in the comments, which red flag hit closest to home, and what's one small step you can take today to stop ignoring it.